I want to hear it from you, man, the king of deer woods.
Knowing what I know now, I probably could have killed a third.
It's crazy how, the changes that you need to make really sometimes ain't that big. I think a lot of the conversations we have when we're talking about deer hunting will be relatable to the people that follow along with us.
You're listening to the Hunt More Official Podcast with Jonathan Moore and Hunter Myrick. By diving into their past experiences, this podcast focuses on the learning process of hunting big bucks in the South. Follow along and let's hunt more official.
So let's, before we get too deep into our conversation, let's go ahead and welcome everybody to episode 2, Myrick. I think the last episode went pretty good. Yeah?
I would say so, yeah.
It's gotten like 100 views by this point on YouTube, and it hadn't been quite a week, and I was pleased with that, with it being a podcast and us just kind of chit-chatting about our opinions and thoughts and things like that. I thought it did pretty well. So if you had questions about the first episode, or you have questions as this episode or the rest of the episodes come on, please feel free to comment, and we'll do our best to get back and answer those as quick as we can. Me and Myrick have tried to start this podcast like 4 or 5 times within the last 15 minutes, but it has been a busy Saturday here at the shop, and now I think we've got it quieted down. And dude, we're just gonna jump right into it. You're in the woods today working on some things that you've got marked down on a list, and we're gonna talk about that list. Deer season ends in Alabama today, and you told me you're gonna hunt this afternoon, yeah?
Yep.
I think it's one of those things you have to go. You've been all season long. You might as well go the last day of the year. So I do wish you the best of luck. But tell me a little bit about what you're into today. You sent me a picture the other day of your all-season deer calendar, and I'm not gonna lie, man, it sparked a fire in me. It got me fired up.
What do you want to know about it?
Well, first of all, just kind of tell me what made you kind of sit down and do that.
Well, I'd say years past, we always have a long list of stuff we need to do, and we never finish.
Yeah.
So this year I want to finish.
Yeah.
Because you know how it is. It's you roll in deer season. You got deer to hunt. But everything's not ready for you to go kill that deer. So then during the season, you're trying to continue to. We spend more time working during the season,
right,
than we do actually hunting.
Right.
And then you know what I mean. So I try to make a list of things I wanted to do, break it down month by month.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Hopefully get everything done so when October rolls around next year, I'm hunting and not working.
Yeah, I get that 100%. I mean, I'll have to say I'm the world's worst about being that way, about like having a whole list of things that you say you need to do, and we need to do this and do that, and as time goes by, you start fishing, or you start doing something else, or it's too hot, or you got too many things going on, you never do get to it, and then when deer season gets here, all you're doing is trying to like catch up, and you're missing out on I think some of the opportunities that you should have got because you just weren't prepared. And I've already myself kind of started doing some things. I pulled a couple or set up a couple mineral sites. I've got a feeder put out. I built another feeder the other day that I sent you some pictures of. That's going to probably go out in the woods this weekend. But if you're listening to this podcast or this episode, I encourage you to kind of make you a list of some things that you need to do throughout the season or throughout the off season, because it'll help you be a lot more prepared when deer season gets here next year and you can just go hunt. Today you're working at a spot a place that you've had forever. You've hunted this for probably 15 years or so. And you just found a section of that property that you can hunt and be able to see the best spot on the property, kind of, right?
Right.
I've heard you talk about this place. I've hunted this place with you myself for the last few years. How long would you say it took you to learn that piece of property?
I would say it probably didn't take but one season to learn it.
Yeah.
But it took me 10 or 12 years to care.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
For 10 years, I was just hunting it to hunt it. I knew there were good deer here. I was just hunting. I didn't care why they were there. None of that. I was going to hunt. I was just hunting, period, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and then the light bulb turned on. I was like, how can I make these hunts more efficient?
Yeah.
And how can I be more successful too?
For sure.
So I started trying to pay more attention to the when they're there, the why they're there, and all of that. And I've kind of over one season, I would say I've pretty much figured that spot out.
Yeah.
I'm still making adjustments because you know it's all thick around it, so there's not but so many trees you can get in.
Yeah.
So this will be my third different tree in this one spot, but I would say if you get the right conditions, and you can probably agree with this, if you get the right conditions of that spot, you can kill a deer there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, one of the hunts I had this past year was at that specific spot, and I mean, it was the conditions. It was east wind, early season. There was like 4 or 5 different bucks that were in that area, and when the conditions were right, they were there every single time. And sure enough, that afternoon, here they come. It just didn't work out, I mean, all the way like you wanted it to. But you say it took you a year to learn that piece of property. I loved how you said it took you about 10 years to care, because I think that for me, you've shaved years off my learning curve in regards to deer hunting, because in the last 2 years I've started kind of paying attention and caring a little bit more about why deer are using the properties that I'm hunting. And even this past year, I feel like I've pretty much got a good gauge and learned how the deer are going to use it. And next year, if I'll stay on top of my list and kind of set myself up, I ought to be able to kill them, or whatever deer's there, I ought to be able to kill them or have an opportunity at them pretty quick. So again, I think that just kind of hits home the point that everybody kind of needs to get them a list of things that they need to get done in the woods, and you need to get after it. Because otherwise, it's going to be the same old season. We kind of ended the last episode on that little point right there. It's going to be the same old season that you had this past year. That kind of answers the next little point that I've got on the list here. What caused you to be so meticulous and start writing that stuff down? You would probably just say that you got to care a little bit more. You got to want to kill some bigger deer and want to be more successful.
I've said for the last couple of years, I'm tired of working during deer season. I want to hunt during deer season.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and the best way I knew to do that was this year, just make a list and break it down month by month.
Yeah.
You know, it's if you list everything out you have to do that year, it's a long list.
Right.
If you break it out month by month, that turns into 2 or 3 things a month, and that's really not that bad. You know, you might can tackle that in one day on the weekend.
Absolutely.
You know, instead of trying to tackle everything in 2 weekends.
That's right. I agree. It's really not that hard to do. You just got to make it a point, sit down, take the time, and kind of get your stuff organized.
Right.
So if you're one of those people that's about to start doing that, like say, I've got a piece of property and I'm going to take this year and I'm going to start caring. I'm going to sit down and try to figure this piece of property out. Where would you start? I mean, you had to hunt a new property this past year, so I know you had to kind of go through that process again of learning a piece of property again. Where do you start when you go into trying to learn a piece of property?
It depends on what time of year I gain access to the property. This specific property, I gained access in the summer. Summertime scouting is my least favorite time. A, I'm terrified of snakes. B, everything's green, everything's dry. You know, trails are hard to see. So I'll start with looking at maps. I try to identify all the edges. You know, I try to find where multiple edges come together. I'll start there. That would more or less be, I would say, where I would hunt. Yeah. But maybe not necessarily where I'll put my first camera out at.
Right.
I'll basically try to look for a spot where the most edges come together. And then I'll back off of that spot. Like, where do these deer want to be in the summertime? Because a lot of deer don't want to be in the middle of thick stuff in the summertime, especially bucks. When they're regrowing their antlers, they don't want to be hitting their antlers on sticks and limbs and all that. So basically what I'll do is I'll find a spot, multiple edges come together. Typically a creek is involved. I will walk that creek and I'll look for creek crossings. You know, that's one of the easiest things to find in the summertime is a creek crossing. You can't. You know, the ground's soft, you're going to see tracks. And it may put me 200 yards away from where I'm hunting. where I will be hunting that year, but I'm trying to get inventory.
That's right. Yeah, you're not really trying to set up to kill right now. You're trying to figure out where the deer are at.
And once their antlers are fully grown and they're getting ready to shed their velvet, I'll kind of transition it back to where I think I can kill them at.
Right, yeah.
So really, I'm looking at maps. There is some boots on the ground scouting, but really it's mostly maps.
Yeah.
And getting cameras close to areas that I'm interested in. I'm trying to find edges because
yeah, well, when you say
I like edges.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm gonna make you answer that question because I know folks are gonna ask it. When you say edges, kind of explain what you're talking about. I know what you mean, but just kind of give me an elaboration of what you mean.
I mean, that's just really just a change in, we'll say, habitat.
Yeah.
That could be a creek. That could be from hardwoods to pines. That can be from young pines to mature pines.
Yeah.
That could be a point coming down that runs into a creek, and then you got a pine thicket on one side of it, and then you got a swamp on the other side of it. That's basically how the creek stand is that we were just talking about.
That's right. Yeah.
The way I see it, the more edge you have at one spot, the more that spot kind of tells a story, which I told you before.
Yeah.
If I was to describe a spot to you and it takes me 10 seconds or it takes me 3 minutes to tell you about that spot, I would say it's probably a good spot if it takes you 3 minutes to describe it. You want the most change.
Yeah, a spot where there's kind of a lot of things going on. I mean, I think that, I know you've sent me pictures, you send them to me all the time of maps that you've drawn out the edges or drawn out kind of how the deer are moving, and the deer are typically moving along a line. For example, like a field edge, I think about my property, how some of these clear cuts kind of bottleneck down into the woods, and those little loops in those clear cuts, I mean, there's deer trails all the way around them because they walk that change in the habitat. So, I mean, if you're looking at a map of your own property and you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I start in regards to scouting it, zoom out and try to find, I mean, where the edges are. Are there some fields around you? Are there some creeks around you, maybe on your property? That'll give you a little bit better idea of where you need to start when you go boots on the ground, I would say.
Right. And another thing I'll say is don't just use one hunting app. Look at the map on Onyx.
Yes.
Look at the map on Base Map. Look at the map on Hunt Stand.
Yeah.
Pull it up on Google Maps because the aerial imagery of all those four are not the same. Some show greater detail.
That is so true. You can see so many different things. You can almost kind of, if you've got access to all of those different apps, then you can pretty much kind of see the woods in all 4 seasons.
Right.
I mean, summer, fall, and some of them just have, I mean, they're just clearer. You can see, like in some of the open like fields and stuff, you can see trails that are beat down through them because of when the pictures were taken. But that's a good point there. I mean, branch out and as far as what apps you use to scout, because the imagery is going to be very different. You kind of mentioned this. What sign are you looking for when you get into the woods? You're looking for like creek crossings and stuff. For this time of year, what would you say for this time of year? Like if somebody's fixing to go scout a piece of property right now, what kind of sign are you going to pay attention to? What are you looking for?
I'm looking for rub lines, scrape lines, and trails. And I like to trails obviously are good. I like to follow those trails back to bedding. I like to follow rub lines back to bedding, and I like to follow scrape lines back to bedding. I'm not necessarily like, let me give an example. Like, say there's a food plot, and then you follow a scrape line for the next 200 or 300 yards. Yeah. I'm not going to sit on the scrape line. I'm going to try to sit between the scrape line and where I think they're bedding. Yeah. Because a lot of that, let's just assume that they're hitting that food plot right after dark. Yeah. They're hitting that scrape line on their way to the food plot, which you might can assume that's even at dark. Yeah. I want to try to follow that scrape line as close to their bed as I can possibly get. Yeah. Because realistically, that last 30 minutes is when you're going to kill them. That's right. Yeah, you're right. The closer you can get to their bed, I feel like the higher your odds are. Yeah. So I'm not going to necessarily sit on that sign. I'm going to use that sign to maybe tell me where they're bedding. Yeah. And then position my stand according to that. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that's something I've done in the past is like seen a bunch of rubs somewhere and be like, man, I'm fixing to hunt right here.
or seen it walking through the woods scouting this time of year and think, man, I'm going to hunt right here next year. And you never, it never really pans out. You may see some deer here and there, but you never really see what you were trying to see.
Right. Naturally, you want to sit on the sign because you know he was there.
Yeah, right.
But you can use that sign. That sign's going to tell you something. It'll paint you a picture, and it's going to kind of lead you to where he bed.
That's right.
Where he beds. But also, let's say that buck bedded there and you kill that buck.
Yeah.
There's a reason that mature buck bedded there. You can almost count on another mature buck bedding there next year and doing something similar. So that's not just deer specific. That's going to be something that every mature buck will want to do because they're not going to bed just in a random spot. They're going to bed at a spot that gives them the most advantages, I would say. Right. So you kill that deer this year, more than likely you can kill another deer off that bed next year.
Right, because the bigger bucks don't just kind of use the same area the same way, most likely.
Right.
Yeah. I see that. I was walking a spot yesterday that was down in that area where I saw wishbone last year, or year before last, and it's a very good spot for a big buck to bed. Obviously, wishbone was bedded there at one point, and I do believe that there were some other bucks bedded in that area this past year. I didn't go down there and hunt as much around that spot like I did last year, mainly because I was just trying to stack deer up. But I did, walking through there yesterday, I did see some sign, kind of like you're saying, rub lines that just, the rubs were maybe 15, 20 yards apart, but they slowly just kind of followed the trail all the way back to, just some of the thickest cover, some of the nastiest cover you could imagine, but it was in one of those spots that, I know has good thermal pull. I've read some stuff about that. It's got probably some advantages when it comes to thermals and how they scent check the area before they ever leave their bed. And if you can find out where those deer are bedding and get, like you're saying, close to that sign, the closer you can get, the better. Or the closer you can get to that bed, the better.
Right.
Your odds are going to be at killing that deer, I think, the next year.
Right, but also, you could find that sign and walk another 200 yards to their bed.
Right, it could be farther away.
I know that's hard to accept, but
they could be bedded a lot farther than you think.
Right, you're trying to get as close to that deer as possible without spooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times that sign will tell you where they're coming from.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that is you got to always keep in the back of your mind. I know I have to, because I'll think the deer like right there under my nose. They will bed a lot farther away than you think.
Right.
And they'll travel a lot farther than you think in a nighttime period. Like leaving their bed, feeding through the night, and making it back to their bed. They'll walk a long ways.
Well, even during the day, they'll walk a long ways. I mean, how many times have I had a deer on camera at one spot, and then 800 yards, 30 minutes later, he's on the other spot?
That's very true. You've had pictures too.
If you're hunting a property correctly, those deer, they're not going to be scared of it.
No, you're right. And you've had deer too. You hunt a lot of property kind of in the same county. The properties are spread out, but you'll have one picture of a deer over here, and then that evening he'll be a mile away.
Right.
That's just so. You got to do your best to try to get as close to that bed as possible. You may not be able to, and if you can't, then I say pour the corn to them and try to get them there. That's all you can do.
If you can bait, then bait them up. If you're one of those people that's against baiting, that's fine. But hey, that's just another tool in the bag.
It is,
in my opinion.
Yeah, because
you don't need to use bait as the reason why you're killing deer. You need to go in there and you need to find a spot that you would hunt, even if you weren't baiting.
Yeah,
I can kill a deer here, even if I don't have corn here. Well, we're gonna sweep the pot because we can't put corn out.
Yeah, for sure. Because my neighbor's going to.
Right. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. And you can't shoot every deer that comes to your corn pile, because then that turns into a food plot example. You shoot every deer that walks in that food plot, gets the deer going.
No, yeah.
They're going to start hitting that food plot at night.
That's right.
Essentially, a corn pile is just a little micro food plot. It's just a little small food plot.
Yeah.
If you treat it the same, you can kill deer off of it.
Yeah. I agree. Well, that kind of...
Go ahead. And you can also use that corn, that bait, to manipulate their movement to where you can get away with more winds. I've told you that in the past.
I mean, that's something I didn't even have written down for today, but elaborate on that.
I mean, the spot at the creek, it's on an east wind, you're golden. You can put it where you want to put it. But say the wind's coming out of the northwest, well, I would move that corn, 30 yards in one direction to try to pull them just off that trail enough for my wind to scoot past.
Right.
So I can still hunt there on that wind because I moved their line of movement ever so slightly.
Yeah. I mean, because they're
willing to budge.
Yeah.
They're going to bust you.
That's right. They're going to walk the same trail either way. But they're going to typically they're going to circle and come into that spot based on where that corn is.
Right. And a lot of times I would forecast that a week before.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to do because the weather, especially in the south, it changes. But if I'm going to say I hunted it Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to feed it Sunday night when I leave. If I know next weekend was trending this wind, I would feed it in the other spot because I had 2 cameras on it. One camera was watching the scrape, one camera was watching the corn pile.
That's right. I remember that.
But remember, I would move the corn a week in advance so they have time to adjust to it. So if I was able to shoot down there on a Friday afternoon, we'll hit it again in that same spot. So they've already had a week to adjust their line of movement. So I can manipulate their line of movement by just moving the corn. It might have been 20 yards.
Man, that goes into a whole nother level of strategizing to kill them. I think that's being a student of the game right there, dog.
Yeah, and that was just enough change for my wind to get right past the deer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's all you need. You just need a little advantage. Even if you're anti-corn, maybe use the corn to affect their line of movement just a little bit in your benefit.
That's right. That's some good information there, man. And I think that's good stuff that folks can kind of take as we get into probably one of the slower parts of hunting season for everybody, February and like early March. That gives you some things that you can kind of start doing now and start putting into action now so that you're more prepared for next year. Obviously, turkey season is coming up, and I'm excited about that. Me and you've already got a date scheduled on the calendar, man. Aren't you fired up about it?
Yeah, maybe you can put me on one.
Maybe I can put you on one. We're going to try to kill 2 this year. I'm going to try to get me an Alabama gobbler myself.
They're hard to get, ain't
They're
they?
tough, man. They're tougher than I thought they would be. I always heard people I know Michael Waddell's one that always said how hard-headed Alabama gobblers are, but man, they're tough. Took us, like 8 hours to get one to gobble, 6 hours to get one to gobble, but we made it work when we finally got one to gobble. We got one more question here, and we kind of answered it, but I'll just we kind of hit around it, but I'll just ask the question, and you can give me kind of the straight-up yes or no answer. Do you walk past 12 scrapes to sit, or do you sit on the 12 scrapes to hunt?
You walk past them. We already answered that one.
You walk past them.
That happened to me on Friday. I counted 12 scrapes, and I just kept trucking. I'll basically follow those scrapes straight to a veterinarian.
Yeah.
So I'm walking past them.
Yeah.
You know what I know now? I'm walking past them. 10 years ago, I'm sitting right on top of them.
Yeah. Fingers crossed, boy. Hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 2. So thank you all that have tuned in and listened to this week's podcast. We'll hit you with the weekly piece of advice. Myrick, you go first. I went first last week. What's your piece of advice for all the listeners?
The best advice I would say I gave it earlier. Use as many maps as you can.
That's so
because
true.
They can all tell you something different.
Yeah, you can see at some edges on some maps that you can't see on others.
Right.
That's
I would say
true.
use every single resource available before you ever put a foot on the ground.
Yeah.
Because if it's a big property, you need a place to start. You don't want to just go in blind.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. I would say one piece of advice is to get busy. I'm kind of talking to myself, but that's one of those things that, like, this time of year, I'll have a whole list of things to do, or things I want to do, and because you just don't make it a point to get to them they slowly fall by the wayside, and you're left playing catch up when deer season gets here. So I encourage everybody to make you a list like Myrick did. Get your old deer calendar. Use your notes app in your phone. Make you a list of some things you need to get done for next year, and then get busy doing it. So thank you guys for tuning in to episode 2. We'll catch you again right here next week. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as well. And we will be here with you another time on the Hunt More Official Podcast. We'll see you.